folks, if you think your family's got skeletons, wait till you hear this. My sister came smiling with balloons in hand. Little did I know she'd stick a knife in my back the same day. It was supposed to be a celebration, but that inheritance, Lord, that inheritance set off fireworks you wouldn't believe. Y'all ever feel like the rug got pulled out from under you, like the ground you thought was solid was just a thin sheet of ice over a freezing lake? It had only been 2 months since we buried Dad. 61 days. I'd counted every single one. Grief, I'd learned, isn't a wave that hits you and then recedes. It's a whole new climate you have to learn to live in. Some days are just foggy and damp, where you can't see 2 feet in front of your face. Other days are just plain cold. This day was supposed to be my sister Emily's 30th birthday, and my mother had decided, in her infinite wisdom, that what our broken family needed was a party. A little bit of joy, she'd called it, to remind us of the life that goes on. I told her I wasn't ready. The thought of plastic smiles and making small talk felt like trying to run a marathon with 2 broken legs. But you know how some families are? My feelings were an inconvenience, an unwelcome guest at their table of forced happiness. The quiet in the house was a fragile thing, and I heard it shatter when a car door slammed outside. A wave of cheerful, loud voices followed, rolling right up to the front door. And then, they arrived. I was standing by the living room window, holding a lukewarm cup of tea, when Emily's shiny SUV pulled in. I watched her get out, laughing as her husband Mark pulled a giant bouquet of Mylar balloons from the back seat. They were bright, obnoxious, and spelled out, "Happy 30th." She floated in on a cloud of perfume and self-satisfaction, dragging a constellation of shiny, helium-filled platitudes behind her. The front door burst open. "We're here!" Emily's voice boomed. "Is the birthday girl's favorite little sister ready to celebrate?" She swept into the room, all bright colors and loud confidence. She didn't so much walk as make an entrance. My mother, who had been fussing over a plate of cookies, lit up like a Christmas tree. "Emily, sweetheart, look at you! Oh, and the balloons! How wonderful!" I just stood there, a gray little rain cloud in her sun-drenched parade. She finally turned her gaze to me, her smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. "Sarah, you look tired." It wasn't a question filled with concern. It was an accusation. "You're bringing the mood down." I tried to smile. It felt like bending steel with my bare hands. "Happy birthday, Em." "Thank you," she said, her smile back at full wattage. "Now come on, no long faces today. Dad would have wanted us to be happy. He loved a good party." And there it was, the classic emotional cudgel. Dad would have wanted it. The phrase they'd been using for 2 months to justify pushing past the pain, to wallpaper over the gaping hole he'd left in our lives, as if grief was a choice, as if I was choosing to be miserable just to spite them. What they didn't seem to understand was that for me, Dad's absence wasn't a memory yet. It was a physical presence, an empty chair at the dinner table that screamed louder than any of their laughter. The afternoon was a blur of saccharine sweetness. Cake was cut, gifts were opened. My mother and Emily and Mark laughed about old times, carefully editing Dad out of any story that might lead to a somber moment. I just sat there, nodding, sipping my cold tea, feeling like a ghost at the feast. Then, as Mark was packing up the gift wrap, my mother cleared her throat. The air in the room changed. The fake party cheer evaporated, leaving behind something cold and sharp. "Well, now that we're all together, I suppose we should talk about the other thing." Emily set down her champagne flute. "What other thing, Mom?" "The lawyer called yesterday, Mr. Henderson. He's finalized the paperwork for your father's estate. He can meet with us next week to, read the will." My stomach just dropped. We all knew Dad had a will. He was a meticulous man. But talking about it right then felt so crass. We were divvying up his life while the crumbs from my sister's birthday cake were still on the table. Emily, however, perked up. A different kind of light entered her eyes. Not birthday joy, something sharper, hungrier. Oh, well, it's good to get that settled, I guess. Did Mr. Henderson give any indication about the arrangements Dad made? He said it was all very straightforward, Mom said, just as we discussed with your father. As we discussed. That little phrase hit me like a stone. What had they discussed with him? I was the one who had been there every day for the last 6 months of his life, holding his hand, reading to him, listening to his fears. Emily and Mom would pop in for an hour, bring a casserole, and call it doing their part. I looked over at my sister. She was trying to look nonchalant, picking a piece of lint off her expensive sweater, but she couldn't hide it. I saw her glance up, and her eyes met mine for just a split second, and that's when I saw the smirk. It was tiny, fleeting, a little curl at the corner of her lip that told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't a smirk of confidence. It was a smirk of victory. And that's when I knew. Something was off. Real off. The following Tuesday felt like walking to the gallows. Mr. Henderson's office smelled of old paper and furniture polish, a scent I'll forever associate with betrayal. The air conditioner hummed, a low, anxious sound that filled the silence. Mom was wringing her hands in her lap, trying to project an aura of somber dignity. Emily, on the other hand, looked like a cat that had just cornered a canary. She sat perfectly still, a picture of false mourning, but her eyes were darting around the room, taking everything in. Mr. Henderson, a man whose face seemed permanently set to sympathetic but firm, finally entered carrying a thick leather-bound folder. He gave us all a practiced, sorrowful look before opening it. He droned on for a few minutes with legal jargon, executor duties, probate court, all words that flew right over my head. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I just wanted him to get to it. Be careful what you wish for. All right, he said, his voice calm and professional. Let's get to the primary bequests of your father's, Mr. David Miller's, last will and testament. He cleared his throat. To my beloved wife, Helen, I leave the marital home, free and clear of any mortgage, as well as my pension and life insurance policies to ensure her comfort for the remainder of her days. My mother let out a small, shaky sigh of relief. That was expected. Dad loved Mom, and he would always make sure she was taken care of. I felt a small bit of the tension in my shoulders release. Now, Mr. Henderson continued, regarding my remaining assets, including my investment portfolio, savings, and the family vacation property on the lake, he paused and looked up over his spectacles, first at Emily, then at me. This was it. The air felt thin. These assets are to be divided as follows. To my youngest daughter, Sarah, who was a great comfort to me in my final days, I leave the sum of $25,000. $25,000. The words just hung there. It felt like a slap, a tip, a consolation prize. Dad's investments and the lake house alone were worth, well, a hell of a lot more than that. The lake house was my favorite place on earth. It's where he taught me how to fish, where we'd sit on the dock and he'd tell me stories. It was our place. I couldn't breathe. I looked over at my mother, but she was staring intently at a spot on the carpet, refusing to meet my eyes. And then Mr. Henderson continued. And to my eldest daughter, Emily, I leave the remainder of my estate, all stocks, bonds, savings, and the full title to the property at Miller Lake. The rest of the estate. It was a punch to the gut that knocked all the air out of me. It had to be a mistake. A typo. Dad wouldn't do that. He wouldn't. He had promised me. He'd promised me the lake house would be mine one day. "This old dock will be waiting for you, kiddo," he'd said just a year ago. The hot sting of tears welled up, but I fought them back with everything I had. I would not cry in front of her. I turned my head slowly and looked at my sister. Emily had her head bowed, a hand covering her mouth as if in shock. She was performing. A single, perfect tear rolled down her cheek. But her eyes were gleaming with triumph. "Oh, Daddy," she said, her voice thick with fake emotion. I don't know what to say." I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and call her out for the fraud she was. But my tongue felt thick and useless in my mouth. My whole body was numb, frozen in a state of pure, unadulterated shock. Mr. Henderson closed the folder. The will is signed and witnessed. It's all perfectly legal and binding. As we stood up to leave, the room was spinning. Mom rushed over to Emily, hugging her, whispering how she deserved it, how she was the one with a family to think about, a husband, responsibilities. I was just Sarah, the single daughter, the one who apparently didn't need anything. I walked past them head down, needing to get out into the air before I suffocated. As I passed Emily, she leaned in close, her perfume choking me. Her hand brushed my arm, a gesture that might have looked like comfort to anyone watching. But it wasn't. That's when she whispered something that turned my blood cold. In a smug, cruel whisper that was for me and me alone, she said, "Suck it up, little sister. He always loved me more." The car ride home was silent, a thick, soupy quiet that was heavier than any argument. My mother kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror with a look that was equal parts pity and impatience. Emily just stared out her window, humming a little tune under her breath. Humming. When we got back to Mom's house, I knew it was time for the other shoe to drop. We sat at the dining room table where we'd celebrated her birthday just days before. The ghost of those damn balloons seemed to mock me from the corner of the room. I finally broke the silence. My voice came out raspy, raw. I wasn't looking at either of them. I was looking at the wood grain on the table. Emily sighed dramatically. "Oh, Sarah, Dad said a lot of things. People get sentimental when they're, sick. You can't take every little bedside promise to the bank." My head snapped up, my eyes blazing. It wasn't a little bedside promise. It was a conversation we had 100 times over my entire life. He said he wanted me to have it for my kids someday. "Sarah, honey, let's not do this," Mom jumped in. "What's done is done." "His decisions?" I shot back. "Or your decisions? What did you two discuss with him, Mom, when I wasn't in the room?" My mother flinched, and right there I had my answer. She'd been in on it. "That's not fair," she said. "We were just talking sense. Emily has a husband, a stable life. You're still trying to figure things out. The house is a big responsibility." Responsibility? My voice rose. I was responsible for him. I was the one changing his sheets, making sure he took his meds, holding the basin for him when he was sick. Where were you, Emily? Oh, right. You were picking out new countertops for your kitchen renovation. That is a low blow. Emily's voice turned hard. I have a life, Sarah. I couldn't just drop everything. I visited. You visited like you were visiting a museum exhibit. You came, you looked, you left. I lived it. The argument got heated, fast. It went from the will to every resentment from our entire childhood. It all came spilling out like guts. How I was always the sensitive one. How she was the pragmatic one. You've always been jealous of me, she yelled. You're just mad because for once, Daddy acknowledged that I was the one who made something of myself. Made something of yourself? You married a man with a trust fund. That lake house, that wasn't about money to me. It was about him.
It was the last piece of him I had left, and you took it. My voice cracked. I looked at my mother, pleading, "Mom, please, you know he promised me." She looked away. "Emily is right, Sarah. The house makes more sense with her. You can visit." Visit? Like a guest in my own father's house? The audacity of it stole my breath. It was then that I realized I was up against both of them. They had closed ranks. My heartbreak was hardening into something cold and solid. My voice came out low and dangerously quiet. "You're going to sell it, aren't you?" Emily's face tightened. "That's none of your business. It's my property now. Mark and I were thinking it would make a great down payment on a bigger place in the city." There it was, the final nail. She was just going to liquidate our childhood memories for a bigger walk-in closet. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. "You won't get away with this." Emily laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Get away with what? Reading our father's legal will? Grow up, Sarah. You lost." I looked her dead in the eye, and it's not over. Her smile vanished. She saw the look on my face, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her features. She slammed her hand down on the table, the coffee cups rattling. The sound was like a gunshot. "You listen to me," she said, her voice sharp and venomous. "You will accept this, and you will walk away. You try to fight this, and I swear to you, you'll regret ever crossing me."
Regret. That's a funny word. For 2 days after that blowout, regret was all I felt. But Emily's threat? It didn't scare me. It lit a fire under me. You don't tell a cornered animal to play dead. It's just gonna come out fighting with everything it's got. I spent the next 48 hours fueled by coffee and spite, rereading the will in my small apartment. It seemed airtight, simple, cruel, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Dad loved details. He loved puzzles. This just wasn't his style. And there was that flicker in Mr. Henderson's eye I couldn't place. Expectation, maybe? So I called him. "Mr. Henderson, it's Sarah Miller," I said. "I have a few more questions." "Of course, Sarah. How can I help?" "Is there anything else? Any other documents, appendices, codicils?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was just long enough to make my heart start thumping again. Then, with what sounded like a relieved sigh, he said, "I was wondering when you might call. Your father gave me strict instructions. He said I was to read the primary bequests first and then wait." "Wait for what?" "For one of you to question it." He said, and I quote, "The one who cares enough about my memory to fight for it is the one who should know the whole story." I nearly dropped the phone. The old fox, the clever, wonderful old fox. It was a test. What's the whole story, Mr. Henderson? There is, in fact, a secondary clause, a conditional addendum. He had it drafted about 8 months ago. He asked me to come to his office, and as he laid it all out for me, a slow, wide smile spread across my face for the first time in months. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. Addendum B. The clause stated that the inheritance of the lake house was conditional. It was contingent upon the recipient, Emily, demonstrating a commitment to preserving Dad's legacy. Specifically, it forbade the sale of the property for 10 years without the written consent of the co-beneficiary. "The co-beneficiary?" I asked, my eyes wide. "You, Sarah," he said. "And if the primary beneficiary attempts to sell the property or is deemed by me, the executor, to be acting against the spirit of the clause, ownership immediately transfers in its entirety to you." It was beautiful. It was perfect. Dad knew her. He knew her greed. And he had built the perfect trap baited with her own avarice. He had given her the gun, knowing full well she'd use it to shoot herself in the foot. When she told me her plan to sell it, she had already triggered the condition.
All we needed was proof. My mother was a witness, but I knew she wouldn't side with me. Fat chance. It was my word against Emily's. If you're finding the story as wild as I did, and you want to hear more tales of when things aren't quite what they seem, maybe take a second to hit that subscribe button, because trust me, the story isn't over yet. I looked at Mr. Henderson, my mind racing. I think I can get you proof, I said, because Dad wasn't the only one who kept secrets. During those long months at his bedside, he and I had talked about everything. He had given me the key to the lock. Little did she know, I had one more ace up my sleeve. I had Mr. Henderson call another meeting. I told him to just say there were some final papers to sign. The conference room was electric with tension. Emily strode in like she owned the place, taking her seat at the head of the table like a queen. "All right," she said, annoyed. "Let's get this over with. I have a contractor meeting at noon." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Actually, Emily, we're here to discuss an addendum to your father's will. Addendum B." Her condescending smile froze. "A what?" The will was read. "It's done." "Not quite," he said calmly, and proceeded to read the clause out loud. As he spoke, the color drained from Emily's face. She looked like she'd been poleaxed. "That's ridiculous," she stammered. "He can't do that." "I assure you it is perfectly legal," Mr. Henderson said. She turned on me, her voice a venomous hiss. You did this." "I didn't do anything, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "Dad did. He knew you." "It's her word against mine that I ever said I would sell it," she screeched. "And you'll back me up, right, Mom?" She turned to our mother, demanding loyalty. Mom just looked from one of us to the other, trapped. "Well, I don't rightly recall the specifics," she mumbled. She was crumbling. But it didn't matter. It was time to play my ace. "Actually, Mom, you don't have to," I said, placing my phone on the polished table. "And Emily, you're right. It shouldn't just be my word against yours. So why don't we listen to Dad's words instead?" I hit play. My father's voice filled the silent room. It was weaker, frail, from a recording I'd made weeks before he passed. And that's my biggest fear, kiddo, that Emily will see the house as an asset, not as a home. She doesn't have the connection to that place that you do. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm putting in a little insurance policy with Henderson. She'll get the house on paper, but you, Sarah, you'll hold the heart. If she tries to rip the heart out and sell it, well, then it becomes yours, the way it was always meant to be. It's the only way I can think of to be fair, to test her. Do you understand, sweetie? And then my own quiet voice from the recording. "I understand, Dad." I hit stop. The silence in the room was devastating. Emily's face was a mask of pure white-hot fury and utter humiliation. She had been played, not by me, by our father from beyond the grave. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat softly. "In addition to your own stated intentions, this recording makes your father's wishes unequivocally clear. As executor, I find that you have acted against the spirit of the conditional bequest. Emily, you have forfeited your claim. As of this moment, ownership of the lake house transfers to Sarah." My mother gasped. Emily just stared at me. All the fight was gone, replaced with a look of such profound hatred it chilled me to the bone. She stood up slowly, picked up her purse, and walked out without another word. My mother burst into tears. "How could you, Sarah? How could you do this to your sister?" "I didn't do this, Mom," I said, my voice weary but firm. "You both did. I won. But wait till you hear what she did next. Real life ain't a movie. The mess just doesn't get swept away." The night after the meeting, Emily drove up to the lake house, her last night with the keys, and she took the light bulbs. Every single one. She even took the little one out of the refrigerator. I found out when I drove up that weekend, walking into a dark, cold house, and I just laughed. It was so childish, so pathetic, that I couldn't even be mad. That was her final shot. Not a bang, but the sad, silent fizzle of an unscrewed bulb. I haven't spoken to Emily since. I hear she's bitter, that she tells everyone I stole her inheritance. Some people believe her. Family get-togethers, I'm told, are as awkward as a pig on ice. Not that I've been invited. And you know what? That's okay. Sometimes winning feels a lot like losing. I won the house, this beautiful, quiet piece of my father's soul, but I lost a sister. Or maybe I just lost the idea of a sister I never really had. You can't lose something that wasn't truly yours. I spend most of my weekends here now. I put in new light bulbs. I sit on this dock, the same one Dad and I sat on, and I feel him here with me. He's in the lapping of the water, the whisper of the wind in the pines. It was a hard lesson, that blood may be thicker than water, but money can turn blood to poison. Justice isn't always a big fiery explosion. Sometimes it's just the quiet satisfaction of knowing you stood up for what was right. It's bittersweet, that's for sure. But the sweet part is worth it. So I have to ask you all, have you ever seen family tear itself apart over money or an inheritance? What happened? Let me know your story down in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for listening, folks. I'll see you in the next one.